Uh, so I will be speaking first, as an introduction of my talk, I will speak about two other inspirations on the negative side for this initiative that we are talking about today. The first one is what I would call the big freeze problem. For those that are used to certification, you are probably very familiar with the big freeze issue. That is to say, once you have done some work and you have finished your certification activities, well, that's so hard to change anything anywhere because you have to redo so many verifications, so many everything. So what happens is that usually you freeze everything so that you can avoid having to redo activities and so on. Obviously, right after Emmanuel's pitch, you already have some ideas of where we are what we are getting at. But I was extremely impressed when the first time I realized the impact of this big freeze problem probably was at some European Space Agency meeting where we are supposed to present, where we were presenting the result of a study we did for them at that point. And usually those meetings, you have several projects, one after the other, presenting their results. One of the other projects was presenting new functionalities they were adding to RTEMS, which is an OS that is very used very much in the space industry. And basically, the project was about how to make RTEMS easier to certify for the ESA standards. And they were bringing a lot of added value to RTEMS just for the purpose of easing qualification and certification activities. And the guy next to me was grumbling, and he was really pissed off by the presentation. He was presenting something else after that. And afterwards, he said, well, you know, that's very nice what you have done, but we have spent already 2 full years, certifying the current version of RTEMS. Well, the current version of RTEMS at the beginning of their project. RTEMS is open source, so it was evolving along the way. And after 2 years of certification of the version of RTEMS they were using, the company decided that nobody in the company was allowed to use anything else but the certified version of RTEMS, making it impossible for them to use all the nice functionalities that were brought by those other people. And that was interesting to see, to think about how could we avoid that specific problem, making sure that people can work together on various projects and benefit from what they do without facing this big freeze problem. The other case where I saw the big freeze problem was in our own company. You know, AdaCore is providing most of you probably know that we are providing Ada compilers and tools around environments around our Ada compilers mainly for people writing high assurance software. And our compiler is based on GCC, which is an open source technology that is evolving extremely fast. So since our compilers have to provide some quality assurance to our customers, what we usually do is we take at least the part of the GCC backend that we need for our compiler very early on. We work on qualifying what we need and change everything that is needed to ensure the quality we need for our customers. It can take up to 1, 2, or 3 years to do that. And we are facing exactly the same problem. We were facing in the past exactly the same problem that person at ESA was doing. That is to say, by the time we have finished to qualify and to make sure that we have the quality we want in our compiler, then the compiler has evolved so much that everything we have done is completely out of phase with what is in the current version of the compiler itself. So, and that's even more when you are working in open source communities. So we had to face that problem, and I will talk later about how we solved that problem, at least partially. Another interesting question that I would like to ask people that work in the certification area. Most of you know that, well, most of you will be using an RING 653 OS on your system one way or another. And have you thought about if the OS you have decided to use will still exist in 15 years? Fair questions. Most of your projects will last much longer than 15 years, that maybe 30, 40 years, right? So that's a real question. So if you look at the market, you see that at least to my knowledge, I'm not sure I know all the solutions, but I know at least 5 different commercial solutions for RX53, and I'm aware of 4 private solutions that are maintained internally by Avionic companies. I won't mention them here, but if we are also putting in the bag some experimental versions based on RTEMs that were done somewhere in Europe, we have more than 10 solutions for a problem, 10 solutions for the same problem, and we know that the market space is relatively small for RX53 OSs. So if you look at what happens usually in the software industry, you can already predict that in 15 years, not all those 10 solutions, or at least the 9 first solutions, will be available or in good conditions anymore. And what happens if it is your solution that has disappeared in between? That's a problem, right? And that's interesting to see what happened in the Unix world in the last 15 years, because basically Linux has appeared a little bit more than 15 years ago, and it has changed completely the picture of Unix systems. It has basically changed completely the game. And so why and what will happen for those guys? And in general, what happens if there is one of the solutions that decide to go open source? Will this RX63 open system change the situation in this area as Linux has changed the situation in the Linux area? That's a good question to ask. So let me go to the bottom line right away. Basically, our idea around this project OpenDO is to try to bring the best of 3 different worlds. So we have talked a lot about Agile and Lean. Here, I will just talk about Agile and Lean as a single concept in this presentation because my predecessors made it very clear what the difference between those 2 terms. But for me, that's somewhat of the same ideas at some higher level. So, and the idea is to try to solve the issue of how to create and maintain in a nice way higher assurance and certification project. So how do we do that? Knowing that we would really want to have a way of writing high assurance software more efficiently. We want to be able to reuse more. We want to make it more fun and attractive to developers. Because the problem is that now, just to find developers to work on this project is becoming a serious issue in our companies. So if you can find a way to make it more attractive, you will find a way to attract more brilliant developers, and you have a better chance of success at the end. Clearly, you want to cut costs. Everybody wants to cut costs, so you need to cut costs. And you want to make your methods more visible and more interesting and more visible so that at least other people can use the same methods and easier to learn for students. Always this problem of finding new people to work on your project. And basically the idea is we'll try to bring the values offered by open source software and agile and lean techniques to the development of certifiable software in order to bring those benefits here. Here I put the less costly on the lib and open source side, but in fact it goes on both directions. Clearly saving costs will be brought both by sharing at the open source level and by using more efficient techniques. So that's basically the idea. So let's see how we can do that. And first, since we talk a lot about agile and lean, let me remind a little bit what it means, what I mean by lib and open source here, because that's probably the only thing that has not been discussed very much this morning.